I gave my daughter everything. My love, my trust, my future. But the moment I signed those papers, I unknowingly signed. She said it was just paperwork, that it was for my convenience. What I didn't know was that I was about to lose everything. My home, my independence. I am Henry Wallace, age 76, once an aerospace engineer, now a retiree in Flagstaff, Arizona. My beloved wife passed away 2 springs ago, leaving me both grief and a modest inheritance, $850,000 from her family. It was meant as financial freedom, to cover my care, make some home improvements, and preserve the house we raised our daughter in. What I didn't expect was how much that money would come to mean, not just for me, but for what it would reveal about trust and family. My daughter, Amelia, moved back recently. She came bearing assurances, fresh shelves installed in my garage, and flyers about a new robotics club at the college. She said she wanted to help me manage my days, paying bills, keeping the yard neat, handling medical appointments. Everything quickly seemed easier, until I realized it was her idea to consolidate the inheritance into a joint account under both our names. I remember the day clearly. The warm late morning sun poured into her rented apartment downtown, marking its presence with streaks across the dining table. She said, "Dad, this will make everything simpler. No delays, no mailing checks. I'll refuse access unless you ask. It's just convenience." I studied her face, bright with determination, confident. At 76 I'd seen a lot, but trusted the clarity in her eyes. She's adult enough, I thought. So I nodded and said yes. Later, at the bank, I signed forms explaining the joint account. My handwriting looked shaky even to me, faded over the years. My signature had grown thinner, older. But at the time, I didn't stop. I didn't ask for help. I just trusted her completely. Back home, I spent the afternoon unpacking the boxes she'd brought, labeled Dad, Books, and Tools, Dad's. She installed new blinds, fixed a squeaky hinge on the front door, and asked if she could repot the roses from the widow's walk. I didn't hesitate. She seemed so organized, thankful even, and I rolled up my sleeves to help. That evening, family dinner felt cozy once again. She'd made baked chicken and roasted veggies, warm comfort thawing some chill I hadn't realized had crept in since my wife passed. We ate and talked about upcoming visits, new radios I planned to build, the nice neighbor who'd been checking in. I felt a gentle reassurance returning, like a sunset after storm clouds. Before bed, I found a letter on my table, "Notice of intent to list your property." My chest contracted at the words. I shoved the paper aside until tomorrow. I fell asleep, thinking everything would still be fine in the morning. That tomorrow came with more letters. Recording of affidavit. Mortgage discharge request. Transfer of deed pending. I telephoned Amelia. "Sweetheart, what's all this?" "Selling the house." Her voice softened. "Oh, Dad. It's routine, just paperwork so nothing tax-related trips you up. I'll sign once I see it. I'll make sure it's still your name at the end. I promise." But when she handed me the documents that night, I noticed something odd. No signature lines for Henry Wallace, only Amelia Wallace, trustee. She gave me a hug and said, "Trust me, Dad." Later, in bed, I closed my eyes and felt an internal tremor. It wasn't fear. It was doubt. Why would my name disappear? Over the next week, I paid closer attention. I used to be confident reading technical manuals. Now I struggled to make sense of forms loaded into the bank portal. There were screenshots she emailed me. "Your account now records joint trusteeship." Isn't that easier? But something was shifting inside me, an edge I didn't trust. One afternoon, she left the documents on the dining table. I picked them up, my fingernails trying to hold steady the edges of the paper. In the margins, she'd written, "Dad, no need to worry, just initial this and we can move forward." I stared at my own initials scrawled without reading. On my chest, the question pulsed, "Did I?" That evening, I sat in the recliner where I once read bedtime stories to a younger Amelia. It was the same chair she curled into during thunderstorms, when the wind rattled the windows and she needed steady reassurance. I traced the faded piping with my fingertip, thinking of that voice. And then I remembered her voice at age 6, afraid after the first quake in Flagstaff. "Daddy," she whispered, voice small. I took her in my lap, told her I'd always be her anchor, even when the world shook. I closed my eyes and thought, then why can't I feel anchored now? The next morning, I waited for her to leave to walk skyscraper trails with Marjorie, the retired nurse from 2 doors down. I took the stack of documents and my vintage radio notebook to the park bench by the trailhead. As I waited for her, I lined up pages. Notice of pending deed. Affidavit recorded in my name or not. Screenshots showing trust ownership next to her name. By the time she joined me with 2 thermoses of tea, the sun was just cresting the horizon. "Dad," she said, "you look worried." I handed her everything, watching her read. She sighed. "Oh, Dad." I rested a hand on her shoulder. "Tell me." She looked at me with hesitation. "They probably told you it's simpler, tax-wise. But Dad, why is your name off the deed?" My throat tightened. I said, "That's what I'm trying to understand." She didn't have an answer. That afternoon, I called my old friend Tom, who had counseled me after my wife's death. We sat on our respective porches that evening, on speakerphone, twilight settling over both yards. He listened, then said slowly, "Henry, if you don't feel right, fight it. Don't let them tell you you're just forgetful, or that you're old." The word old hurt like a punch. Still I nodded in the dark, resolved. By nightfall, I looked over the roses I'd planted behind the house, red and pale pink blooms stirring gently in the breeze. That's when I made a decision. I would not sign another thing until I understood exactly what I was signing, and why my name had vanished from my own home. I would not be forgotten. I would stand even if my limbs felt weary. That night, I took out my old voice recorder, dust-coated but still functional, and recorded a message for myself and maybe for others to hear someday. "This is Henry. I inherited money once meant for me. I trusted my daughter to help. But when your name disappears from the deed, it stops being about help." I pressed stop, tears catching in my throat, but I finished the night with a gentle resolve. I would fight for my home. I would fight for truth. Because no matter how lonely or vulnerable, I was not without value. And no house, no amount of money, could ever diminish what I had built with my own hands and my own integrity. At first, everything felt right. Amelia moved through my world with purpose. She settled in quickly, her shoes by the door, her coffee mug on the kitchen shelf, her laughter echoing off the walls. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was my helper, my caregiver, my companion. And I was grateful. She paid the utility bills promptly. Fixed the leaking faucet I had been ignoring for months. She even climbed onto the roof to replace the bent radio antenna I'd been meaning to replace since last winter. She came back down, wind in her hair, holding the rusted old part like a trophy. "Still got it," she grinned. "Remind me never to doubt you," I chuckled, handing her a glass of iced tea. Sundays became sacred again. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a bottle of wine we never finished. We sat on the back porch as the sun dipped behind the horizon, and she told me stories from her years living in Seattle, her failed yoga business, her brief flirtation with painting, her old college bus she still wanted to visit, tucked away behind the music hall like a relic from another life. I listened, laughed, and sometimes felt my chest swell with pride. My daughter had returned. One evening, I was in my recliner, reading an issue of Air and Space, lost in an article about a retired test pilot who'd flown SR-71s. I heard Amelia's voice from the kitchen. "Dad, there's some mail for you." She walked in, handed me a crisp white envelope. County insignia in the corner. I adjusted my glasses and slid it open. Notice of pending real estate transaction, county records. I frowned. "Looks like someone filed something about this house," I said slowly, rereading the header. She waved it off casually. "Oh, that? Just a clerical error. Happens all the time. Some real estate site probably pulled the address wrong from public records. I'll handle it." She kissed me on the forehead and returned to the kitchen. But as I sat holding the letter, something fluttered beneath my ribs. An unease. The kind you get when you realize you've forgotten something important. Keys, a wallet, a password, but can't name what it is. Still, I folded the paper and left it on the coffee table. I told myself, don't be paranoid. You're just not used to someone else handling the business. I didn't want to be one of those old men, suspicious, bitter, stuck in their ways. So I pushed the worry aside. That night, I slept soundly. Or at least, I thought I did. The next few days blurred together in the warmth of routine. Amelia made lists of groceries. She brought back potted succulents and a box of local honey. The back porch now had hanging lanterns. The house felt alive again, as if it had exhaled after holding its breath for 2 years since Mary, my wife, passed. She kept saying, "This is your time now, Dad. Let's make this house work for you, not against you." She even brought in a contractor to talk about reinforcing the deck. "I don't want you falling through those old boards," she joked, nudging me. Then came the second letter. I was folding laundry. Yes, even engineers can handle towels, when I noticed an envelope slipped between ads and junk mail. Request to transfer title, Flagstaff County Recorder's Office. This time, I sat down. I read the fine print. It wasn't addressed to me, but the property ID matched my lot. And the name at the top? Amelia Wallace. My name was nowhere on it. I asked her about it over breakfast the next morning. She hesitated for just a beat too long. "Oh, it's nothing really. Just organizing things for tax benefits. They sometimes need someone younger on the paperwork. It helps with insurance. Don't worry. It's all under control." I nodded, but that flutter in my chest had grown into a quiet, steady drumbeat. Still, I didn't press. Not yet. That Sunday after dinner, she pulled out a tablet and showed me photos of a greenhouse being constructed behind the house. I had seen the frame going up but hadn't realized how far along it was. She scrolled through shots, cedar panels, insulation diagrams, projected yields for tomatoes and sweet peas. "We'll make it self-sustaining," she said. "Maybe even sell produce at the farmer's market." I smiled, impressed. But inside, a question lingered. Who is we? That night I dreamt of Mary. We were back on the porch, sipping sweet tea. She looked at me with that familiar sideways glance, the one that said, "You're missing something, Henry." I woke up before sunrise. The next day, I called the county records office, just to ask a hypothetical question. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. If a new deed is filed with another name, say, a trustee or co-owner, that person will have legal claim unless challenged within a certain time frame. I hung up. The flutter had become a thud. I sat by the kitchen window, coffee untouched, and stared at the greenhouse construction outside. Amelia was kneeling in the dirt, gloved, planting. She looked so earnest. And I loved her. But I also remembered a lesson from my years designing fail-safes in aerospace. Trust, but verify. Even the strongest wings need routine inspection. I opened the drawer in the old roll-top desk and pulled out the documents Amelia had asked me to sign weeks ago. I reviewed the titles: power of attorney, property authorization, beneficiary designation. All legal, all neat, all favoring her. And in my shaky penmanship, my signature, again and again. I leaned back, heart sinking. I wasn't sure what I'd signed away. But I was beginning to suspect it was more than convenience. It might have been everything. A tight knot formed in my gut. It started small, a whispering discomfort, but it grew louder with each passing day. More envelopes arrived in the mailbox, each bearing language that felt foreign to me. Notice of encumbrance, Flagstaff County Recorder's Office. Property transfer filing confirmed. Request for beneficiary designation change. The handwriting across them was unfamiliar. Amelia had insisted they were part of the paperwork I'd signed, but the letters still didn't feel right. They made my heart twist with a sense of impending loss, like stepping into a darkened room expecting light. One afternoon, I decided to ask Amelia directly. She was in the kitchen, chopping carrots with steady precision, the blade tapping against the wooden cutting board. "Sweetheart," I said, voice catching, "are you sure these letters mean nothing? Something feels off." She paused. The knife hovered. I watched as she released it, straightened, and offered me a gentle smile. But her eyes flickered, just for a second. Dad, she said smoothly, voice steady. Really? It's nothing. I take care of these things so you don't have to worry. You rest. I've got this. I nodded, but something inside me tightened. A ribbon of protectiveness wrapped around my heart, protecting it from what I didn't know yet. Over the next few days, I watched for more signs. I began to notice small things. She began hanging up the phone suddenly when I walked in the living room. When I sat at the desk to review my emails, she hurried past, closing the lid on her tablet. She insisted I sleep in the recliner upstairs, to rest, leaving her alone in the house in case anything needed fixing. And then, there were whispers I overheard when I thought she didn't know I was paying attention. Quiet words exchanged with her husband in the porch light, soft, but laden with urgency. My hand shook the first time I found an email draft on her tablet, titled, Trust Setup Agreement. I saw my name barely visible in the line. But there was also another name, hers. I swallowed hard, my thoughts jumbled, electric with confusion. Did I authorize this? Did I even see this draft? Why wasn't I told? I felt like an engineer trying to calibrate an instrument gone awry. Something was malfunctioning, and I couldn't pinpoint what. That evening, I sat alone in the recliner, hands clasped around a mug of lukewarm tea. I remembered how I taught Amelia math, making cross shapes of cereal for counting, how her giggles lit up the kitchen. I remembered the pride I felt holding her first model rocket, painted blue and white, set to soar into the sky. But tonight that light felt dimmed. The tick of the clock, the hum of the night, all whispered unease. Over dinner, merely reheated vegetables and chicken I hardly tasted, I decided to watch her closely. She talked about streamlining property assets, shielding from future tax burdens, and insurance optimizations. Her words sounded fine on the surface, reasonable, even educated. But by the time she said, "Trust me, Dad," I felt a pang. My heart dropped at the double meaning. That night, I lay awake on the sofa, eyes tracing the ceiling beam cracks. Thought of Mary, my wife, and how she would have noticed something was off. She had a way of sensing change before it came. Back when I built her those ornamental brackets for her plant pots, she would have tapped one and said, "Henry, you made this too delicate." She had an edge for detail I always loved. I turned in the darkness and whispered, "I wish you were here." The house slept around me. But inside my chest, the storm began brewing. The next morning, I waited until Amelia left for the greenhouse project and slipped my shoes on. I retrieved the stack of letters, heading to the park bench where I had gone before. I sat there again, tracing the stamps and letterheads with my fingers. I felt the weight of years in those envelopes, weight I was no longer willing to ignore. I heard my own voice, low and steady voice recorder hidden in my coat pocket, say, "Henry Wallace, I'm not sure what's happening with my money or my home, but I have a right to ask. I have a right to know." I pressed stop and exhaled. When I returned home, I went straight to the bank. I asked to see the account ledger. The account manager pulled it up, digital lines showing transfers, withdrawals, trust setup fees, all going to Amelia Wallace Trust. When I asked, "Amelia's Trust?" the manager looked surprised. "I wasn't aware your daughter set up a trust in her name." I thanked her and left. I walked home slowly, the documents and statements heavy in my hand. I reached my front porch and paused, pressing the stack to my chest. If I ignored these signs any longer, I would regret it. If I didn't act, I might wake up one day in a house grouped under someone else's name, with nothing but fading memories to anchor me. And the screwdriver from my workshop felt too far away for a fight I didn't yet know I had to win. Tip of the iceberg. The first crack had appeared, and I needed to dig deeper. It began with a visit from Tom, the retired pastor next door. He knocked one afternoon, umbrella in hand, tiny blue raindrops falling around us, and said, "Henry, I've heard rumors." His voice grew somber as he added, "Stealing from someone who loves you, it's harder than stealing from a stranger. Much harder." Tom's words cut through me, not because they were new, but because they confirmed what my gut already knew, that maybe, just maybe, the betrayal was closer to home than I wanted to admit. That Sunday, I walked into church carrying a small manila envelope, statements, letters, notes, firm beneath my arm like a shield. I wanted honesty. I wanted wisdom. But once I opened my mouth in the foyer and whispered my concerns, I felt the temperature drop. "Henrietta, maybe it's just senior moments," one neighbor offered, smiling too sweetly. Another placed a hand on my shoulder. "Oh, honey, I know these things worry you." A few asked me in quiet tones to step away from the joint account, to let Amelia handle it. Such generosity, they said, could kill the worry bug in your head. I nodded and smiled, but their words chafed on my tongue. A suspicion. They thought I had lost my senses. That evening I sat in my study, once the workshop of a curious engineer, and felt isolation weighing on me. I opened the drawer and retrieved the evidence again: bank statements, title requests, trust paperwork with her name. And a quiet, determined voice in my head: gather every scrap of truth. I began working in silence. I typed a spreadsheet of every deposit and withdrawal in the joint account. I compared dates on letters to my daughter's trips to the greenhouse. I scribbled notes about when my name disappeared from title documents. Each line felt like a puzzle piece snapping into place. On one afternoon, I found myself sitting in the Arizona sunlit warmth, indexed folders on my lap, flipping through mail. A cool breeze rustled the pages, and I heard the neighbor kids playing down the street, nothing but life continuing around me. But inside, it was as if I was alone on a raft, pieces of paper my only companions. I also began reconnecting with intimacy I'd forgotten. By noon, I'd walk down the cul-de-sac to the community park where Tom often lingered, offering a friend's ear more than sermon. "Tom," I said one afternoon, "I've got titles, letters, spreadsheets, but I feel weak. I don't know if I can withstand this, not with friends looking away." Tom looked at me, raincoat unbuttoned, hands folded. "You've got more backbone than any of them, Henry. And maybe they're the ones too scared to believe the truth. Don't let them define your reality." That afternoon, I helped Tom set up chairs for community lunch. We joked, but I understood now, strength didn't always look like loud proclamations. Sometimes, it was quiet work, compiling, asking questions, refusing to look away. But the whispers persisted. I visited the local coffee shop, my old haunt, where bright mugs of latte and espresso soothed calmer days. A regular, Betsy, approached. "Henry, honey, I heard your daughter's been doing so much. Isn't it wonderful how she's rallying around you?" I nodded and responded politely, but my insides twisted as she summarized Amelia's tender efforts: new blinds, grocery lists, greenhouse projects. Productivity speaking so much louder than one old man's doubts. I didn't cry. I pushed a quiet "thank you" through my lips and drank my coffee flat. The flavor tasted like betrayal. That evening, I retreated to the workshop in the basement. Distress made me restless. Without thinking, I grabbed a blank sheet and started tracing a shape I'd fashioned years ago: a paper airplane. I folded the creases again and again, smoothing errors, honing performance. It glided from the table in a soft arc, landing by a test console. My heart caught at the simplicity, one fold at a time. I paused. I set the plane beside me. Then I pulled myself back to the desk: statements, legal forms, appointment schedules with the county recorder's office. "Bit by bit," I whispered, "one fold at a time." On Sunday, I approached the church again. No envelopes this time. I simply spoke to the greeter, asked if I could lead a reading. They handed me the microphone. My voice shook at first. I've shared my concerns and perhaps made some uncomfortable. But it's not confusion I speak from. It's clarity. I know my name belongs on this home. And I won't accept second-hand answers. A stunned hush. Some eyebrows raised. Some heads turned away. A few, I noticed, looked at me differently. With respect. After, Mary, a church friend, came up and said, "May we pray together?" We did. Her prayers weren't trite, but searching. And as the amens sank, those who remained looked at me as if maybe they had misjudged me. It wasn't full acceptance, but forgiveness of misunderstanding. A start. That evening, I retreated into memory. On the mantel atop some faded family photos, I looked at a framed photograph of Amelia in my arms at age 4. She wore a bright red dress, eyes alight. I remembered holding her up to strike the clapperboard at her school play, Amazing Grace. She stumbled, scared, but I steadied her. She backed up, took a breath, and sang, "How Sweet the Sound." I closed my eyes. "Dad's still here," I whispered. "Just needed proof that I'm still standing." A week later, I invited Angela, my lawyer, to tea. I laid out the documents in order: joint account changes, trust designation, title alterations, transfers. She examined them with sharp eyes. "Your suspicion is reasonable," she said softly. "This isn't normal safeguarding, it's a serious shift in ownership. We'll start with letter notices." I stared at her, hoping this was the beginning of restoration. That night, I set aside the legal forms and sat in the recliner again, single-lining a notebook, one fold at a time. Outside, the house held its breaths. Did the roses feel welcome still? Did the radio antenna, my trusty experiment, sit okay? I didn't know. But I closed my eyes. And I believed. Even if the world around me had already assumed I was done, I wasn't. Because I believed in truth. I believed in justice. And I believed in me. In the hush, I heard thunder, just a distant rumble on the horizon. My heart thumped. I folded another paper airplane quietly, and started again. I clearly remember the moment. Late afternoon sun was filtering golden through the kitchen window, dust motes dancing in the light. I just made myself a cup of chamomile, the steam curling in front of my face like a ghostly veil, when I turned and saw Amelia standing at the island, her brow drawn and her lips pressed thin. "It's not what it looks like, Dad," she began, voice wavering. I took the last sip of tea, feeling warmth flow down more from nerves than beverage. "Then tell me what it looks like," I said. My voice was quiet but steady. Her shoulders tensed. She avoided my gaze. Finally she said, "I've been managing the paperwork. Utility, tax refunds, trust documentation. I was putting everything through my name so it wouldn't revisit your estate later." I set my cup down, the china clicking sharply against the counter. "Then why," I paused, "why isn't my name on the property documents?" She looked away. I felt a hollow shift inside me, like the earth gave a small tremor. She sighed, turning back to me. "Dad, you're getting older. I thought when your name came off paperwork, the state might step in someday. I wanted to keep everything in order." "By removing my name?" I asked. Each word cost me a bit of my composure. Her lips quivered. "It's called vanity of title transfer. It prevents complications. Look, I had the trust drafted legally. You're still a beneficiary. This house is still yours." I studied her. She looked chastened but also firm. Someone less steady might have crumbled. I felt my hands tremble in my pockets. Memory flashed. Years ago, she was 9 and terrified of thunder. She jumped onto my lap that night as lightning split the sky. I held her tight, sang her lullabies, whispered, "I've got you." She fell asleep safe, trusting me completely. That night's warmth rose in my chest, but now the weight of suspicion replaced it. I took a breath. "You told me to trust you." She nodded. "And I mean it. But trust is earned, not taken." She swallowed hard. "I didn't want to worry you with taxes and forms. I thought I was," she paused, searching, "protecting you." Her voice caught in her throat. I looked at her, no pity. This wasn't about age. It was about power. Silence swallowed us. Outside, the wind chime tinkled, an old prison of memory and eternity. Finally she spoke. "I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing." "What you thought?" My voice cracked. "You took my name off this house." "I didn't sign any transfer form. Not deliberately." "I know," she said, tears shining. I put my name as trustee. But it's our house, you're still protected." "Protected?" The word sickened me. I exhaled slowly. "Treasury, insurance, these are not jailers, Amelia." Her face went pale. She swallowed again. I swallowed too. "How could you make those decisions without me?" She looked torn. I just wanted everything settled." The kitchen fell silent again, except for the hum of the fridge and her shaking breath. I could nearly hear my heart slowing, closing against her. Finally, I said, "I trusted you, sweetheart. That trust should have been enough." Her shoulders sagged. I added softly, "Now I feel like a guest in my own life." Amelia's bottom lip trembled. She stepped forward, reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return the gesture either. She whispered, "Dad, let me fix it." I found my hat on the counter. "Maybe you should," I said. I turned and walked out. Outside, the air hit me, cool and real. I took the hat off and rubbed my forehead through my thinning hair. I inhaled the smell of sagebrush and pine. The bright gold leaves of the sycamore quivered in the wind, reminding me of change. A bird called, high-pitched, persistent. And in that moment, I thought about the dozens of times she trusted me. I thought about the small paper plane she made in kindergarten, how she held it tight before it propelled across the living room, full of hope and belief. Had I held her the same way? I wandered into the front yard, letting the grass brush my shoes. I ran fingertips along the shutters. The house, our family home for decades, hummed with memory, birthday parties, late-night talks, lullabies. Now it felt hollow. I crouched and touched the earth under the rosebush. I remembered transplanting it with Mary 30 years ago, hands dirty, eyes bright. I'd whispered, "We'll grow old together, you and me." And we did. Now I whispered, "I need clarity." I looked at my phone. 3 missed calls from Amelia. 20 messages, all unsent texts, drafts unmoved. She hadn't braved the knock yet. I choked down a breath, lifted the hat. One thought echoed, "I'm more awake now. I won't hide confusion anymore." I went back to the dishwasher, rinsed a plate with calm care. I replaced my mug on the drying rack. Inside, she might be waiting, hoping for reconciliation. I wasn't sure. Inside, Amelia was at the island. She looked up when I came back inside. She didn't say anything, just opened the fridge, took out a bottle of water. My footsteps sounded louder in the kitchen. A long silence. Finally I spoke, "Let's meet Thursday. At the bank. With the attorney." Her eyes widened. Her expression flickered with sadness, hope, shame. She nodded and faltered a whisper, "All right." That was it. Not everything was resolved. But I had called the moment. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something new. Not naive trust, but respectful, informed trust. And later that night, I sat in the recliner again, my chest no longer heavy, just filled with resolve. I pressed record on the voice recorder. "Henry Wallace, this Thursday, I face my daughter with reality. I want the truth." Then I pressed stop. Outside, wind rustled again. But I felt steadier, calmer. The day Angela Reeves walked into my front room, briefcase in hand and documents stacked like a lifetime of truth, was the day I realized this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. I had summoned her after painstakingly gathering every scrap of paper I could find, bank statements, property transfer notices, those sneakily titled trust forms, and emails Amelia had accidentally CC'd me on. Words like beneficiary and trustee appeared in her drafts. My name was only listed as a silent footnote. I felt like a man whose own story was being erased. Angela sat across from me at the kitchen table, expressions shifting from skeptical to resolute as she spread the documents out. The morning sunlight cast quarter-size glow across the laminate top. "Henry," she began softly, "you need to know, $820,000 of the inheritance was moved into a trust in Amelia Wallace's name. Your name? It's been removed from the deed completely." My heart froze. "There's no provision for you to access it on your own terms?" I whispered. She shook her head. "No reserves have been set for you, you were expected to rely on her discretion." Every family tool I once trusted, paperwork, signatures, agreements, had become a weapon in someone else's hands. I felt suddenly small in a house that once felt like the whole world. Angela folded her hands. "I'm filing suit against Amelia for breach of fiduciary duty, elder financial abuse, and improper transfer of assets." I stared at her. Window light flashed on the rim of her glasses, illuminating a fierce purpose. "Yes," I said, voice tight. "Do it." The local TV station, KFLAG, came knocking. Not with digital cams or leering reporters, but gentle questions. "Are you concerned about the accusations?" they asked. "What would you say to others in your age bracket?" Something deep stirred. I'd gone from a confused old man to a speaking symbol, someone people could look to before becoming trapped in silence. They aired a clip of me. "It's not about money. It's about respect. Because when your own family doubts your right to know, that's where the line gets crossed." Viewers responded, phone calls, emails, letters written on paper and delivered by kind neighbors. They thanked me for speaking out. One widow wrote, "I'm afraid my son is managing my finances. Now I'll ask questions." Suddenly, I wasn't a lone voice. I was part of a chorus. And it echoed. Legal documents and a court date. The lawsuit progressed quickly, fast for a legal system designed to crawl. Angela filed the complaint. Amelia's attorney attempted mediation. Negotiations were tense. Amelia offered a partial return, $400,000, but I refused. This wasn't a cash grab. This was about truth. Mediation failed. So we headed for court. I remember sitting opposite Amelia in the courtroom, her eyes downcast, mine dry with resolve. She admitted setting up the trust. She said her intentions were protective. But the judge didn't hear defensiveness, he heard facts on paper. Days later, I sat by the fireplace with old photo albums. One black and white photo caught my eye, me and Amelia crouched beside a creek, her hand guiding a tiny wooden boat I'd carved. We'd raced it until a sudden sun ray sparked the wood aflame with our laughter. I pinched the photo, feeling that spark still alive. I saved that boat. I nurtured that spark. Now, as a power shift rose between us, I realized I had to save the bond we once held, and maybe ignite it again. But it had to be on the foundation of integrity. The day of the court hearing felt like standing on a mountaintop with wind screaming, and yet the air was startlingly still. I took a deep breath as the judge called the case. Angela spoke first, clear, succinct, armed with facts. Title transfers, account withdrawals, lack of consent. The words rang precise. Then Amelia testified. Her voice cracked, she apologized. It was real, but it was rooted in guilt, not comprehension. "I thought I was doing right," she said. But it wasn't enough. The judge paused, looked at Amelia, then at me. "By preponderance of evidence," he said, "the property and funds were transferred improperly. Ms. Wallace shall return the trust assets, restore the deed listing Mr. Wallace as owner, and compensate for any delay-related losses." The gavel struck. The hush that followed was thick with relief, sorrow, and potential. Amelia slumped. I breathed out. Later, outside the courtroom, we stood together beneath the harsh mid-morning sun. Amelia's face was raw. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I looked at her, my daughter, my friend, my charge. I squeezed her hand once. "We'll sort it out," I said gently. "Together." Back home, in the quiet of my living room, I sat down and pressed play on the voice recorder. Henry Wallace. Today, the property is home again. Not because of a legal victory, but because I took my place at the table. Because respect begins with asking questions. I leaned back in the chair where I once held my daughter when she was afraid of thunderstorms. Outside, the wind chime tinkled once, a signature note of both ending and beginning. I didn't expect to feel hollow on the day I won. But that's exactly what it was. The courtroom was quiet that morning. Too quiet for something so loud inside me. I sat there, spine straight against the wooden bench, palms open on my lap. Across the aisle, Amelia fidgeted with her necklace, the same gold chain her mother once gave her. Her eyes avoided mine. Angela, my attorney, leaned over and whispered, "They're offering a settlement. $400,000. Half the money, but twice the insult." I didn't even hesitate. "No." Angela studied me. "Henry, it might be the cleanest way out." I shook my head slowly. "It's not about the money anymore. It's about what it cost me to lose faith in my own daughter." She nodded. "Then we proceed." The court called our case. The judge, gray-bearded and somber, reviewed the docket. My name. Amelia's name. The charges: elder financial abuse, fraudulent asset transfer. My name had never looked so heavy in type. Angela opened first, laying out the timeline: the creation of the trust, the quiet removal of my name from the deed, the missing $820,000. She was precise, calm, unrelenting. Amelia's attorney tried to reframe it as a protective oversight, as if trust could be bypassed for the sake of convenience. I felt my fists clench. Then they called me to the stand. I stood slowly. The room blurred for a moment, and then I remembered. This wasn't about justice for an old man. This was about preserving something sacred, a person's right to matter. Angela asked, "Mr. Wallace, did you ever approve the transfer of all your assets to a trust in Amelia's name?" "No," I replied. "Not knowingly. Not ever." "And when did you discover this?" I looked at Amelia, eyes red, jaw trembling. When I realized that my name didn't matter anymore. Not to her. Not to the documents. Not to the house I built with my wife. There was a silence. Then Amelia took the stand. I watched her brace herself like she had walked into a cold wind. Her voice trembled. I didn't know it would feel like theft. I thought I was helping. She paused, blinking back tears. But I wasn't. I was deciding for him. I thought if I controlled the assets, it would be easier. She looked up at me. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Dad." The judge exhaled. His words were measured. "This court finds sufficient evidence of misrepresentation and improper control of finances. Amelia Wallace is ordered to return the full amount of $820,000 and reinstate Henry Wallace as legal owner of all previously held assets." The gavel came down. And with it, the years of doubt and self-silencing cracked, just a little. The courthouse steps were crowded. I expected people to ignore me. But instead, they approached with handshakes, soft thank yous, and even tearful nods. "Sir," one elderly man said, "you fought for all of us." A young real estate agent, probably not a day over 25, threw her arms around me. I watched the story. "My grandfather's been scared to speak up. You gave him a voice." I didn't know how to reply. I just patted her back gently and said, "We all deserve to be heard." Back home, the house looked the same, but it wasn't. Something inside it had changed. I walked into the living room, stood beneath the old wedding portrait of Mary and me. Her eyes sparkled in the photograph like they always had when she believed in me. "You'd be proud," I whispered. That night, Amelia knocked on the front door. She didn't walk in. She stood on the porch like someone visiting for the first time. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Her eyes were rimmed with grief. "Dad." I held up a hand. "Not tonight." She nodded, chin trembling. "When?" I looked into the darkness behind her. "When I can look at you and not see paperwork where trust used to be." She bit her lip. "I understand." I closed the door softly. No anger. Just exhaustion. A quiet moment of clarity. The next morning, I brewed coffee. The scent swirled through the air like an old song. I sat on the porch, watching the wind flirt with the rosebushes Mary once loved. I held a small wooden box. Inside was a folded note Amelia wrote when she was 8. "To Dad, you are the best airplane maker, garden waterer, and hugger in the world. I love you more than the stars." I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The paper was worn, but the ink still glowed with innocence. I smiled, heart cracking open. That girl, she's still in there somewhere. And maybe I am too. The scent of sawdust still lingered faintly in the hallway. The newly polished floorboards shone with a gentle warmth beneath my slippers as I stepped through the doorway of my reclaimed home. Not just legally mine again, emotionally mine. It felt like breathing after holding your breath for far too long. The ruling had been swift. The judge's gavel was barely cold when Angela turned to me and said, "You've got your life back." Amelia was ordered to return every cent, $820,000, and the property was reinstated under my sole ownership. Her attorney, visibly pale, arranged for structured repayments. The court even awarded me an additional fund for elder abuse reparation. And then something happened I never expected. The community stepped forward. It started with a letter from the local senior center. Then a check from the church congregation. A retired builder, Jim Moreno, came with a crew and reshingled the roof on the house, he said with a wink. The local Boy Scouts showed up to repaint the mailbox and plant fall flowers. One morning, a former student of mine, an engineer I'd once mentored, showed up on my porch. "Mr. Wallace," she said, "you stood tall when most would fold. I want to honor that." She'd set up a trust fund in my name to help other seniors protect their assets. The Henry Wallace Foundation, she called it. Now, each day felt different. The house was the same, but I was not. That first night back, I wandered room to room like someone meeting an old friend. The kitchen, the radio workbench in the garage, even the dusty top shelf where Mary once kept her recipe cards. I ran my hands along the hallway wall, fingers trailing memories in the indentations of time. I paused outside our old bedroom. The door creaked open like it had waited for me. Later, I stood on the newly fixed front porch, watching the sky dye itself orange and lavender. The begonia boxes, bright with crimson bloom, swung gently in the breeze, their roots firmly settled, just like me. Tom, my neighbor and confidant, ambled over just after sunset. He was carrying 2 cups of hot apple cider. "Evening stroll?" he asked. I nodded. "Always." We walked quietly at first, the leaves crunching beneath our feet. The neighborhood looked ordinary, mailboxes, porch lights, dogs barking at passing squirrels, but something about it shimmered now. "It's good to have you home, Henry," Tom said, his voice low. "Feels like I'm seeing it with new eyes," I replied. We reached the little footbridge over the dry creek bed. Tom paused. "You did something brave." "I did something necessary," I said. He chuckled. "That too." We stood there for a moment, silence folding around us like an old quilt. Then I shared a memory. "You remember the radio I built from scratch?" I asked. Tom smiled. "That thing with the 3 antennae and the coat hanger? That's the one." I laughed, remembering it perched on the garage shelf like some Frankenstein miracle. Mary thought it was a silly hobby. Until one night, during a blackout, it was the only thing that picked up the emergency broadcast. Tom nodded. "She changed her tune quick." "Yep," I said. She said, "Sometimes the weird little things you make end up saving everyone." That night as I turned in, I thought of that radio. And I thought of my story. A strange, unexpected patchwork of pain and redemption. But maybe, just maybe, it was going to save someone somewhere. The following week, I was invited to speak at a community gathering, Protecting Our Elders, hosted at the Flagstaff Public Library. The podium felt like a cliff, and the crowd a vast ocean, but my voice didn't shake. "I trusted too easily," I began. "But I'm not ashamed of that. What I regret is waiting too long to ask questions. If you feel like something is wrong, say so. Even if it's your child. Even if it costs you everything." A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. "I got my life back," I said. "You can too." The room stood in applause. Afterward, an elderly man approached me with his granddaughter. "This is Mr. Henry Wallace," she told him. "The man who reminded us that dignity doesn't retire." I couldn't stop the smile that crept over me. That night, I returned home and placed a small stone on the edge of the garden, smooth, white, and engraved with a single word, "Begin." I knelt beside it, not to mourn the past, but to plant something in its place. The next morning, I opened all the windows. I turned on the old radio, and I listened not just to the static and the music and the weather report, but to the quiet inside me, and it no longer hurt. A year had passed since the courtroom. The garden had flourished. The radio played jazz every morning, and the house, though it still creaked with the weight of history, felt entirely mine again. But there were still echoes. Every now and then, I'd glance at the mailbox with a strange anticipation, as if closure might arrive with a stamp. And one day it did. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the clouds crouch low and the world is a palette of slate and silver. I was sitting by the window, shelling peas into a bowl when I saw the envelope. It was cream-colored. My name written in Amelia's handwriting, slightly slanted, neat, and unmistakably hers. I froze. The bowl rested on my knees as I tore it open. My fingers trembled, not from age, but from knowing that no court ruling could make sense of what I was about to read. I've waited to write this because I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing it just to be forgiven. I know I may not deserve that now, maybe not ever. What I did wasn't just about control. It was about fear. Fear of losing you. Of becoming the daughter who failed. Of being unable to manage things. But I lost something far greater. I lost your trust. I don't expect you to believe that I've changed. But I have. I've learned humility. I've taken courses on elder care law. I've volunteered at shelters where I sit beside men and women who no longer have anyone. And I remember how close I came to making that your fate. You were always the strongest person I knew. I just never told you. I'm sorry, Dad. For the lies. For the silence. For making you feel invisible. The ink blurred before I reached the end. My tears, hot, involuntary, spilled across the paper, turning her words into something fragile and human. I folded it slowly, pressing the creases smooth with care. And then I placed it inside a small wooden box tucked on the highest shelf of my bedroom closet. It sat beside a few of Amelia's childhood drawings, stick figures of her and me fishing, camping, laughing. A string of pressed flowers. A snapshot of her in overalls with a gap-toothed grin. For a long moment I just stood there. And then I sat on the edge of the bed, resting my hands on my knees, feeling both empty and full all at once. Later that evening, I went for a walk. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick with memory. The world smelled like petrichor, new beginnings and old endings, mingled in the soil. I passed the house with the blue shutters, where Mary and I once stopped to admire the hydrangeas. I passed the tiny bookstore where Amelia used to tug at my hand, begging for one more mystery novel. Every corner held echoes. But for once, they didn't ache. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and made tea. Earl Grey. Just the way Amelia liked it when she was 15. A silly ritual, perhaps. But rituals are the scaffolding of healing. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I didn't throw the letter away either. That meant something. In the weeks that followed, I began to understand something that had always felt too slippery to name. Trust isn't something we manage. It's something we honor. It doesn't live on paper or in signatures or even in apologies. It lives in boundaries, in respect, and sometimes in letting go. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive Amelia. That was a journey still unwinding. But I no longer felt bitterness wrapping around my ribs like iron. I felt stillness, like the first calm after a storm. A few days later, I attended a small gathering at the library, the same group that had once applauded my story. They asked if I had anything to add. I cleared my throat. I want to say this, I began. You can win in court. You can reclaim what was taken. But healing isn't about victory. It's about choosing what to carry and what to set down. Someone in the back wiped their eyes. I nodded, more to myself than to anyone. That evening, I stood in the garden as the sun slipped behind the pine trees. My hands traced the edge of a newly planted rose bush, white petals catching the last golden light. And I whispered not to the sky, not to Amelia, not to anyone in particular. I'm still here. I'm still growing. Inside, the radio played softly. My tea steamed beside the letter. Time, like the gentle rain, had begun its quiet work. Hey friends, if this story touched your heart even just a little, please, take a moment to like this video. It's free, but it tells YouTube that these stories matter. Subscribe if you believe the voices of our seniors deserve to be heard and never silenced. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell us your thoughts. Share your experience. Or simply say, I see you, because sometimes those 3 words can mean everything. By liking, subscribing, and commenting, you're not just supporting this channel. You're helping us protect those who can't always protect themselves. Together, we can build a community where dignity never retires. Red Heart.